We'll call the meeting to order. Children and Seniors, February 23rd. We're having a bill hearing today. Also on your agenda is we were planning to work a bill that I'm still doing a little bit of work on. So I pulled that, and we'll either work it tomorrow or Thursday. So with that, I will open the hearing on House Bill 2271, and this is permitting the court to exercise jurisdiction over children in need of care and adult children in need of care to extend or re-enter custody of the Secretary for Children and Families until 21 years of age. So we'll look to you, Jesse, for an overview on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today's hearing is over House Bill 2271, and as the chair mentioned, it concerns extending or re-entering the jurisdiction of the court as a child in need of care. So what this bill does is it amends two statutes that relate to who may be in the court's jurisdiction. First, the bill would create a new definition for an adult child in need of care in KSA 38-2202. So an adult child in need of care would be a person at least 18 years of age, but not more than 21 years, who, other than this age, meets the definition of a child in need of care under subsection D of that same statute. And that definition of child in need of care lists the multiple factors that the court uses to identify that child as a child in need of care. And second, this bill amends KSA 38-2203, which is a statute that authorizes the court to have jurisdiction over a child in need of care. And subsection C currently gives the court jurisdiction over a child and the power to continue jurisdiction until the child becomes 18, June 1st of the school year when the child becomes 18, if the child's still attending high school, the child has been adopted, or the child has been discharged by the court. A child may be in the court's jurisdiction until they are 21 if a transition plan is not approved by the court. So in a new subsection C3, the court shall not terminate jurisdiction if any current child in need of care under 21 has requested in writing that the court not terminate the jurisdiction. In a new subsection C4, an adult child in need of care who was previously under the court's jurisdiction and not yet 21 would be able to apply to the Kansas Department for Children and Families to be placed in the Secretary's custody. The application would include how the court's jurisdiction and placement would be beneficial for the adult child, and it could include a letter of recommendation. Upon reviewing the application, the department would then refer the case to the county or district attorney to file a petition to establish the court's jurisdiction again. And such adult child under the court's jurisdiction then would be required to participate in case planning, attend school or work, and make efforts towards independence. And if the adult child fails to do so, the department could petition the court for a termination of that jurisdiction. This bill would take effect on publication in the statute book. And I'm available for questions on House Bill 2271.
Committee, do we have questions for Jesse on the language in the bill? Okay, thanks, Jesse. All right, first up, we've got our colleague, Representative Adam Thomas, as a proponent. Welcome to our committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Our committee's better than your committee.
I believe you. No, I'm kidding. Well, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I appreciate you hearing my testimony today as I join others in testifying in support of this bill. Shortly after I began my tenure here in the legislature, I was approached by the mayor of the town, one of the towns I represent, Mayor Stephen Ellis of Spring Hill. As a father of multiple adopted children and someone very involved in the process, I trusted his experience and judgment and told him I would do everything I can to work on this particular piece of legislation. After many conversations, legal conversations, drafts, we are finally here. And I'm very proud of the work that was done on this bill. The bill before us looks at foster children, as you know, find themselves aging out of the system and find themselves in need of reentry based on circumstances that may or may not be out of their control. This bill allows them the chance to reenter the foster care system until the age of 21, allowing them guidance, accountability, and the help needed to get them on the right path. Now, regarding the fiscal note, I saw that came out this morning. I just had a conversation with the budget director, and I asked him quite simply how they came up with the 10% number. He explained it was an estimate, and I asked him the number of these children that once they age out, become incarcerated or part of the correction system. And he said, astronomical, which I would take that to mean more than 10%. So I want you to consider, as you consider this bill, the cost of incarceration is $30,101 per year. When you do the math on the fiscal note, the cost of this bill is $23,011 per year. So you see, the fiscal note may be what it is, but if we keep these folks on the right path, out of the system, out of the corrections facilities, that turns it upside down as they become a good contributing member of society. So I got to tell you, I was not a foster child. I don't have foster children. I have 5, and that's more than enough for me. In which, again, why I lean so heavily on my friend Autumn, who helped me draft this legislation, and my mayor, Steve Ellis. That being said, when I was 18, I was enjoying playing first base on a baseball team that ended up winning the city championship, which was extra special to me because my father actually happened to be the coach. I was 18. I wanted to play next year, but I couldn't because I aged out of the system. So thankfully, I had the support system of my family, my friends, my parents, my teammates, and was able to stay on the right path. It was a sting, as I said in my testimony, a huge part of my life, over and done, just like that. The good news is, like I said, I had people. These kids need people. We can't give up on them. I want to thank Mayor Ellis. I want to thank my friend Autumn for playing a huge role in this bill. I want to thank you for having me, and I ask that you would consider this bill, reach out to me with any questions, and I would love to have your support. And I appreciate DCF's work on this as well. So thank you, Madam Chair and committee, for your time, and I look forward to talking with you.
Okay, Representative, would you have some time for questions?
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and take questions so you can get back to your committee.
Absolutely.
Committee? Well,
84
Representative
hands go up.
Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. How much was the incarceration for 1 year?
$30,101.
Thank you very much. And your fiscal note was how much for the whole year?
8.1 million. It was $23,011 per child.
Thank you.
$7,000 less.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what position did you play?
First base and a 5th string pitcher,
Thank you very much.
approximately.
Representative Helmer.
Are all 5 of your children adopted?
No, they're all mine.
Okay,
My wife had them.
okay. I was going to say, the first night I met you, and I met your wife, I was so enchanted with you and your wife, and, you know, your story and everything. And I could see the love in your eyes and for the children, and it didn't matter if they were a foster or whatever, but
Thank you.
really impressed with you and your family.
Well, when you marry way out of your league, you kind of do whatever you can to keep that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Wagoner.
I used to be enchanted at him, but I got over it. No. No, I do have a couple serious questions.
Yeah.
So basically this bill, I mean, these would be foster care kids. So they would not be living on their own? I mean, they would still need the foster parents to still agree to be parents. That's also part of the equation, right?
Correct.
Okay, and is it strictly on their, it's not like, it's it's not like the social worker or somebody kind of recommends this kid stays a little longer in the system. It's more, it's their sort of internal, like I would really appreciate staying on or something, it's totally up to them.
It's a written request of the person in that age group, unless Jesse could probably help me clarify the language on that, but I believe that's correct.
One more question. So does it matter, of course, by the time kids are 18, a lot of them are like job seeking and are they able to take jobs? Does it matter at all the fact that they might have their own money that they earn, or I don't know how that plays into foster care. Would that matter with this situation?
I don't believe, and Jesse can correct me if I'm wrong, because I mean, I have a 16-year-old with a job, a foster kid, 16 years old, as far as I know, can have a job. So I don't think that would have any effect on it, but that makes them a tax-paying member of society, which would also have a fiscal impact as well.
Could you give us like a scenario of a person, or maybe even the one that inspired the bill?
Well,
Of course, without names.
sure. I think any child that ages out of the system sees the struggles of life, whether at work, whether at wherever they end up. I did hear a story today. There are children who are in the foster care system. They age out and they end up going back to or finding maybe their original parents. Maybe there's a reason why they don't live with their parents, why they got in the system to begin with. So then I wonder if the environment they choose might not be the best for them. So in that particular instance, they're able to reach out and say, hey, listen, I need help. I need to re-enter the system to get my feet set straight. Now, sometimes it takes someone in their life to inspire them and coach them along and get them back in, which, I would love to say happens all the time, but it doesn't. And so I think by having this door open and available to them so they can say, look, tried this scenario, it's not working. Sometimes they need an out. Sometimes they need a way to get back in, get back on the right path without prejudice, without, falling off the beaten path. And I think what this bill will do is give them that option.
Okay, great. Representative Penn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around the concept of an adult child who is 21 years of age or younger, as put forth in this bill. A little bit of personal color might help out. When I was in foster care, when I hit 18, we aged out and we started on the beaten path of life. And there are a lot of other programs that are out there to cover that space when you don't have adequate coaching or mentoring or teammates surrounding you or whatever. And I did try out for baseball and I got cut second round, center field. Something about the height, whatever. But that said, my concern is how do you square the concept of an adult child who we should be getting out there, starting life. We already have a lot of programs that already address a lot of that. This is an expansion of government as well as the taxpayers' funding to support said program. And it's a hard sell to come back and say, it's not the same thing, but it's kind of similar. My brother, my younger brother, abided by or tried to enter into a program such as this in the jurisdiction that he was in, and it stunted his growth, late starting, and put him back even further for life. He recovered. I wouldn't want to do that to another child, much less to an adult who's 18, 19, 20, or 21, but we are psychologically calling them children. The question that I have is also geared toward, we saw, I think it was in Georgia, there was a representative in their state legislature that made the comment that because these kids are black, they're going to go to jail or be killed anyway. Therefore, we should go ahead and abort them on the front end. There's no valuation and no type of, when it comes to appreciating their life and what they bring to the table, there's a devaluation there. Do we run that risk here by saying that children that are in foster care need to have this particular crutch? Because the only other alternative is, like you said, going into the prison industrial complex.
My answer to the first part of that would be, if the taxpayers are footing part of the bill for that $30,000 a year, and we keep these guys out of the system, we're actually saving the taxpayers quite a bit of money. $7,000 a year per person. So when you do the math on that, I would say this will actually be more helpful to the taxpayers and also add more contributing taxpayers to our economy, thus increasing revenue, completely reversing the fiscal note and turning it into a positive revenue. So I would say this bill actually, while you say it expands government, it actually saves the taxpayers quite a bit of money. We're talking millions of dollars. And the next part of your question, I think that statement is rather disgraceful, whichever representative in Atlanta said that. And I don't care what the nature of your person is, black, white, Hispanic, gay, straight, it doesn't matter to me. These are children that need our help. So that is certainly the last thing on my mind, is where they come from, who they are. Certainly, none of that matters to me, honestly. I have a heart for children. So.
And Madam Chair, and I can certainly appreciate that. Thank you for the sentiment, Representative. I guess the facts and figures on the savings, cost savings and everything is based on the premise and the presupposition that they would end up, in fact, in prison, or we would have to pay for that portion of their life. And I just tend to believe that present company excluded a lot of foster kids who age out of the system, can get that start and not end up in prison.
Well, and I think you're a big exception to the rule, and I certainly commend you for that and appreciate all your services. I will say there's a technical amendment that we have drafted, that changes the name of the person, so that will fix sort of the potential issue with how the phrasing and the name of these particular folks are. So if the bill is worked, I'll have that ready. I also have, the budget director is currently looking into the specific percentage of kids that actually end up in the prison sentence, and we'll have that information. So we'll be able to put apples to apples and numbers to that here in the next few days, and I think the numbers will be shocking, and I think this will make this bill even more important and also completely turn around any concerns with the fiscal note.
Thank you for that, and look forward to seeing it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Esau.
I'll try to make mine short. I can't imagine where I was hiding, yes. So in the bill, right near the end, it's on page 7 on this bill that I have printed. Part C, it says, such adult child shall participate in case planning, attend school or work, and make efforts towards independence as determined by the department, and shall comply with the provisions. And if they don't, the department could petition the court to terminate the placement. I'm assuming you wrote that in there because we wanted to make sure they weren't just sitting at home playing video games and goofing off, and they were actually working towards independence at some point. So we might not have to support them beyond this, or maybe not even for the full 3 years. They may say, hey, I'm an adult, I want to be independent. Is that correct? Am I putting words in your mouth?
Accurate, yes.
Representative Helmer, did you have a question?
I wanted to state something. Representative,
That guy.
I say somebody's name. Representative Penn and I all extend our conversation that we were having. Our concern, which I'll extend what we were talking about yesterday, was our experience in having 18 to 21-year-olds in these private settings, in the larger, what are existing now with 18 to 21-year-olds in homes with little girls that are 6 to 8-year-olds. So I would like to see, and he would like to see also, if I'm not speaking out for you, correct me please, that it be considered that there be some wording to take care of that, because that is existent now.
Yeah.
And
It's an absolute concern, and I'm sure that throughout the process, I mean, if that language needs to be added, and that's the consensus of the committee, absolutely. I think to not be concerned with that would be scary. So yeah, I could definitely see that being added into that language, and I would support that, because I totally get a vote in this committee.
see, I think anybody that knows about that might stop the bill.
You know?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you said it, but will these kids still be in the same foster home as when they graduate from high school?
I believe so. I would need to clarify that, but I believe that's correct.
Or they even could be in another one, just somebody helping them. So two people have said to me the number of people that go to prison, two people that are really involved with this told me the number is astronomical that actually do end up in prison. Could you really get us a good number on that?
Like I said, that is already working. I had a conversation with the budget director, and he's looking into that. If there's already numbers out there the DCF has, I don't know. We didn't touch on that in our conversation. That was a conversation I had with the budget director, and he's going to look into the specific numbers. And so when I think of the word astronomical, I think a little bit more than 10%, but I think any number than zero is a problem. So.
See, when I think of astronomical, I'm thinking over 50%. I mean, I'm thinking big. So that's why I'd like to just know a little bit more. But thank you for your work, and thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Representative Smith, for your work on this. I remember when you started this, and here we are today, so I appreciate it. And then just a comment, there was a former member of Children and Seniors who was visiting a prison, I believe it was El Dorado, and she had 10 residents around her, and she asked them just a show of hands how many here were involved in the foster care system at the time. And she said 7 out of 10 of them raised their hands. So I know that's not, it is anecdotal, and I struggle with that word.
Anecdotal?
Y'all, that's not my
too.
vocabulary. So I'll just put that out there for the committee that it's a real thing, and astronomical is probably an appropriate description.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I think if I may just make a quick comment, I always want to ask permission. I don't want to get in trouble. I would not suspect the number. I don't want to assume anything. Mathematically, though, even at 50%, you're talking $15.5 to $16 million, which is more than twice the fiscal note, which is about twice the fiscal note of this bill. So if we can keep these people out and get them as contributing members of society, that's the ultimate goal here.
Okay. Further questions? Keep asking him. Like, we don't want him to go back to his committee. Okay. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Okay, next up we have Tanya Keys, Deputy Secretary at DCF, and she'll be joining us remotely.
Good afternoon, Chair Kincannon Committee. Thank you for an opportunity to talk about House Bill 2271 that you've heard about. Proposes changes to the Child in Need of Care Code to allow adults who are age 18 to 21 to re-enter foster care after they've left foster care. Annually, about 390 adults transition to adulthood from foster care. Some of those young persons choose to stay in foster care until they're age 21. There are a number of adults in care who petition the court or request to be released from custody as an adult. So they may leave foster care at age 18, 19, or 20. There's currently no mechanism for an adult to re-enter foster care once they've been released from custody. This bill provides that opportunity. DCF offers a number of independent living case management supports to young adults to support them, but there might be a time when a young adult experiences some unmet need, sometimes housing, and they feel like they need additional supports and would wish to re-enter foster care to get that, fill that gap. This bill is really timely. In January, the federal pandemic pieces around the Consolidated Appropriations Act, there's a provision in that federal act that requires all states to provide opportunity for young adults to re-enter foster care between the months of January of 2021 and September of 2021. So an additional provision of this bill would help Kansas come into compliance with that federal act that took place in January. A few details about the bill that have been mentioned. Adults are required to participate in case planning work or be engaged in school or their education. And if they're not participating in some of those pieces, DCF would have an opportunity to request from the court that that adult be released from custody. As was mentioned, we did consult with the author of this bill. There are a couple of technical changes that we would propose. Instead of the word or the phrase adult, child in need of care, a remedy for that could be to use the word non-minor dependent in the place of the word adult child. We would request consideration to change that technical language and also clarify in the bill that the court can terminate or release custody if that adult is absent from their placement for 30 calendar days. So those are a couple of the technical pieces. As was mentioned, the fiscal impact to the Department of Children and Families, we would require additional case managers. So we'll have some additional personnel costs. We would have additional placement costs to be able to provide for these adults. In an immediate sense, a lot of this would be state general funds. Over time, we would be able to amend our Title IV-E state plan, which would help us get the federal funding mechanisms to help cover a portion of the cost to serve these adults in care. In closing, this bill will help Kansas come into compliance with the recent January 2021 Consolidated Appropriations Act, which requires states to permit adults to re-enter foster care. It also is going to really help us provide supports to those adults when that adult recognizes or feels that they have a need that has gone unmet. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Committee, do we have questions? Representative Wagner.
Yes, thank you for coming to, I think it's Madam Chairman, for the opportunity to ask a question. I'm a little, if I'm not mistaken, the total foster care system in Kansas has just like 6,000 or 7,000 kids. I mean, it was up to 9 and now it's down to 6 or 7. Am I correct?
There are currently 6,800 children in care. That could include adults up to the age of 21 if they are still in foster care.
Okay. So part of my question is just, I know the fiscal note on this. I'm just mathematically, I am thinking that it can't be that top heavy, that there's 3,500 potential, 18 to 21-year-olds who would be, into the system. I mean, given that from 0 to 18, you only have 6,900 or 6 or 7,000 kids. I mean, my comment is that the math doesn't quite make sense, to a lay person, and I would suggest looking at that. My other question I would ask, so how would you find the additional foster parents? I mean, if a kid left coverage, I mean, I know there's people who foster kids all the time, but then they get some new kids. And so do you think that would not be a problem?
Well, first I can speak to if I may, speak to your question about the fiscal impact. Part of the estimates that we wanted to do were to project looking at those who might have been ages 15 to 18 in the past when they left care, and at either age 18, 19, or 20 could ask to re-enter. So it's less of a point in time number and looking at across a 3-year span who might be eligible within the window of ages 18 to 21, if that helps explain some of the figures. With regard to placement, I think what we anticipate is that we would want to provide housing for these young adults. That might mean that we are helping put security deposits and rent down for their own independent housing. We also have independent living and transitional living placement types for young persons and adults in foster care currently, so they could live by themselves. They might have a roommate who's in care. There could be foster parents who are interested in supporting young adults up to the age 20, so that could be potential. It also could be that we are able to engage a relative that with a bit of support for that relative, that young adult could be living in stable housing with the relative and make sure the relative has supports for them. So there's an array of placement types that we would be able to help secure stable housing for these young adults.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, having 7 children of my own, when they turn 18, they want out. And I'm sure foster care children are probably more so because, you know, a lot of restrictions. But again, my children, after realizing, hey, I'm just working for housing, I want back. So they got 8 months to come back. But if they don't, housing will, you will help with their housing as far as
Yes.
paying part of the rent or something?
Yes, and we certainly, in our independent living services, if they don't wish to re-enter custody, we have options through our independent living services to support them with their housing costs. But in these circumstances, if there's an adult who formally requests to re-enter foster care and that need is stable housing, yes, we would find supports for the housing, you know, on a continuum. For example, we could assure security deposit is made and perhaps help them secure a 6-month or a 12-month lease and pay for those housing costs if they were living on their own. And again, if there are other options for them to live with a relative or a family foster home or a transitional living group care setting, we would help with that too. But you're right, there are many adults who are transitioning, they're receiving case management services. They may not wish to re-enter foster care. This would be their choice. This would be a provision to create the option that it could be there for those who need it. But absolutely, we know there are a number of adults who are receiving the case management services. They're transitioning to adulthood and they feel that they have the supports they need already.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That kind of brings to mind that maybe we ought to have an informational hearing sometime about the processes of aging out and the programs that would be offered to them. Representative Helmer.
I just have my 2 counties down there, Sumner and Cali, so you're probably aware that there was TFI and DCF and St. Francis working kind of together with them. How are you, but my question is, how are you going to control alcohol privileges or whatever you're going to do? Because I know there were some kids that aged out and there were 2 boys that aged out and went to live with their dad. And they were back and forth to TFI. And how are you going to control drugs and alcohol and all of those kind of things? Because they're adults, they're 18 years old. What are you going to do about that?
Sure. Well, I think with this, if they, whether they're receiving independent living services from us and not in custody of the secretary, or if they would re-enter care, there are provisions of our case management services would help with assessments to know any of their behaviors. We want them to be safe. We want them to avoid behaviors that might create a risk of unlawful behavior, just given their age or their circumstances. Certainly, if we know that they have a history of using substances, if they have a history of addiction or some risk around that, we would want to be able to provide services so that they are safe and stable where they're living. So I think that our case management support through our frontline practitioners would help with that and make sure they get connected to any services or supports they need related to use of substances if that's needed.
Are you good with that, Representative Helmer, or did you have a follow-up?
Are you going to retain them in foster care with them using?
You know, I think the bill is written is that if a young adult requests to be reconsidered and re-enter custody, then we'll honor that and we'll work. They do have a requirement to participate in case planning, their education and work. So yeah, we would continue to work with them as long as they're participating in their case planning. If a circumstances would arise that they are not participating or staying in their placement, or they're not participating in the case planning, this bill does provide an option that DCF could request through the court that the jurisdiction be terminated or that custody be released. So there is some flexibility. You know, certainly we would want to customize that and individualize that to that young person and what their needs are.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Director, I'm failing to see how, and maybe you can explain for me, that this is any different than extending the welfare state for a band of our populace, 18, 19, 20, according to NCSL, the 4E Extended Foster Care Beyond 18 map. And the debilitating effects that the extension of welfare state mentality, as well as the economic impact, has. I see that in Illinois they've done this. I see that in Wisconsin they've done this. But those places don't have the same values as Kansas. Why here in Kansas, and how is this any different from extending the welfare state?
I think we're fortunate in Kansas to have really strong independent living services for those adults who transition out of foster care. It's a grand responsibility, and we take pride in knowing that we're providing services and supports that we've mentioned: housing, concrete supports, education, monthly assistance subsidies. Those are provisions of services for them. But I think what we also recognize is that as a state, is it time to offer an opportunity if there's an unmet need? And my experience, before this position, I was a regional director in the state of Missouri in Jackson County, Kansas City. And Missouri does have this provision of letting folks request themselves to re-enter foster care. Typically, they request to re-enter foster care because they don't have stable housing. To the extent that this bill would let us offer an opportunity to provide stable housing at their request, we're not seeking that out. We want to be successful with them as a young adult in independent living. This just provides an additional option at the request of that young adult to be able to have, to be able to fill that gap that they have. It is extending services. It provides an additional legal option. And what we also know is we wish to be consistent with the federal law, the act that took place in January of this year, that states related to the pandemic and the needs and the research out there for young adults who have left foster care. States are required to be able to let that young person request to re-enter foster care until September of 2021.
So are you saying that this particular bill would have a sunset of September of 2021?
This particular bill does not. It would be more permanent. To clarify, the federal act, the Consolidated Appropriations Act, at this time, with what we know from that federal information, is that states are required to permit them to re-enter care until at least September of 2021. There are currently 38 states that have this opportunity to re-enter foster care after you've exited foster care. Kansas is not one of those 38. This bill helps us be compliant with the federal provisions of the Consolidated Appropriations Act.
And Madam Director, I'd like to look into that federal provision, but could you just tell us quickly, what's the penalty if we are not compliant with that quote unquote requirement? Because I would imagine the states would have latitude to determine with the carrots and sticks what they want to be compliant with in the federal sector.
Sure. We have not received the federal program instruction yet, so we are unsure of what if any, consequence or penalty there might be to the state with regard to the allocation that we receive as part of the stimulus for the part of, it's very specific, it's called Chafee funding. It's specific funding for older youth in care. So but we don't have information yet on what any complicating factors might be or consequence for states who are unable to enact provisions with regard to that federal act.
Madam Chair, with that, I'll leave it alone, but I just wanted to say for the record, I have extreme reservations on creating a nanny state that takes care of foster care kids, any Americans, any citizens, any Kansans, from cradle to grave. As soon as they get to the point that they can age out of the system, we continue it forward with cars, with driver's licenses, with this, that, and the third, staying on health care until you're 26. The cradle to grave nanny state piece has a price tag on it, and I bet you it's higher than whatever the penalty is from the feds. Thank you.
Further questions? Representative Ousley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Deputy Secretary. So, try to gather my train of thought here. So, with the children in Kansas already being able to stay in the system until the age of 21 and 390 turning 18 in, you know, roughly a year, do you think the 10% estimate on the fiscal note is close to accurate of young adults that would take advantage of this opportunity?
Yes, it can be difficult doing estimates, but from what we know from other states that certainly not all young adults would wish or request to return to foster care. Again, we have a strong system of supports for them in independent living case management that they can take advantage of. We wanted to be reasonable. So we estimated 10% might experience a circumstance in their life after they leave foster care at age 18, 19, or 20 and want to formally approach the agency and formally re-enter foster care. So we feel good about that estimate.
Thank you for that. And I mean, this sounds like a good idea. You know, a child turns 18, they age out of the system, they're sick of the system, sick of the foster parents, run out, conquer the world, and find out, oh, it's not quite that easy, and may not have that that family support to lean back into. And this would give that child that young adult that opportunity. So thank you for being here today. Thank you for fielding our questions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions. All right. Thank you, Tanya. So committee, I would draw your attention to two pieces of written-only testimony in this, for this bill. They were both referred to by Representative Thomas, and that's from Mayor Steve Ellis, City of Spring Hill, and Autumn Johnson, CASA volunteer. There are no neutral and no opponents, so I'll close the hearing on House Bill 2271.
Madam Chair, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Could I ask one other question, please?
Sure.
And you may know it, or the conferee may know. With all of the programs that we're discussing in this committee, and with this particular bill itself, is there any thought or any training available for those individuals to get them ready for introduction into life? Because what I'm hearing is that this is always going to be a bridge loan to keep them in a state of dependency versus equipping them for independency to go out and become an adult. Does that exist? If so, where is it?
Secretary Keyes, do you have a response to that?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. We start planning and doing independent living readiness at the age of 14 for youth who are in care. Then depending on ages and needs, we also help with some financial planning pieces. We also do readiness, planning for school, education, work, employment supports, housing, and we also provide them with subsidies. So there are a number of readiness or preparatory pieces, especially some begins again when they're at age 14, some of those planning activities, but definitely the point at which they reach age 16, 17, and 18, those transition planning and independent living plans begin. That information and transition planning is also provided to the court, and we try and wrap those services around them. So there are a number of services and supports related to transition to adulthood that are provided.
And who provides those? Is that from the foster care contractors, or is it DCF?
Sure. So while they're in care, in custody of the secretary and receiving services, those case managers and independent living coordinators in those agencies would be helping. Our foster care case management agencies serve that young adult even for 6 months after custody ends. So they have the continuity of those services. Then at that point, as they become an adult and they're receiving independent living case management services after they're no longer in the state's foster care system, DCF employees as independent living case managers serve them and have them in plans until they're age 21 and provide those supports, education training vouchers, their monthly assistance subsidies, and help them with employment and training supports.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair, if I may. And thank you, Ms. Director. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read her name. Tanya Keys, Madam Keys. Thank you for all the hard work that you all do on this. I don't want to be uncharitable to your situation or what services you provide. I just know that for myself and my constituency, the heartburn is with the tax dollars that go out to perform those services that you just delineated, that start in foster care, in CASA. I'm a CASA rep, going through 14 and getting kids on the path to launch into society as productive citizens. The concept would be you have a program, it is supposed to be well-funded. Let us know if it's not. And it's supposed to culminate within a certain time frame, but not continue to extend it if it's actually doing what we're paying for it to do. So I would love to further this conversation, but I'll refer you to my earlier remarks, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Final call. Any other questions? Okay. With that, I will close the hearing for House Bill 2271. And as I mentioned earlier, we were planning to work a bill today, and I've pulled that from the agenda. So, you know, we've got just this week to finish up. If we're going to work bills, we've got to do it this week. So if there's something out there that you've got an amendment that's being prepared or is prepared, just have that, just be ready for that any day. And with that, we're adjourned. See you tomorrow.